What started as a neighbor asking me to fold her laundry became a night I'll never forget, not because of the sheets, but because of the way she looked at me when our hands touched. It was just after 9 on a Tuesday night when I heard the knock. Soft, almost hesitant, not the kind of pounding you'd expect from someone in a rush, but the kind of knock that carries a question in it. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened the door and saw her standing there, I felt a flicker of surprise ripple through me. My neighbor. She was holding a bundle of folded laundry in her arms, pressed neatly against her chest. Her hair was pinned back in that effortless way she always managed, loose strands softening her face. The hallway light caught the faint shine of her earrings, small but elegant. She gave me a half-smile, the kind that hinted at tiredness but also at trust, as though I was the person she knew she could knock on, even at this hour. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice calm but touched with something quieter beneath. "My washing machine gave up on me. I thought, maybe you wouldn't mind letting me finish here." I nodded before she even finished the sentence. I'd like to say it was out of pure politeness, but the truth is, I didn't mind at all. There was something disarming about her presence, the way she carried herself, a mix of composure and vulnerability, like someone who had learned to stand tall but still let a few tender edges show. I stepped aside, and as she walked past, the faintest trace of her perfume drifted with her. Not overpowering, just warm, something floral that made the air in my apartment feel instantly different. She set the sheets down on the couch with careful hands, smoothing them even though they were already perfectly folded. I noticed how her fingers lingered against the fabric, as if straightening them gave her an excuse not to meet my eyes just yet. "Thank you," she said quietly, glancing up at me now. "I promise I'll be out of your way quickly." I shook my head. "You're never in the way." Her lips curved into the softest smile, and for a moment, I felt the stillness of the room settle around us. Just her and me, and the quiet hum of an evening that suddenly felt far more alive. When she handed me one of the sheets to help spread it out, our hands touched, just for a second. The fabric was cool against my skin, but her fingers were warm, steady, sure. It wasn't much, just a brush, but it carried a charge that lingered even after she pulled back. She didn't say anything, but there was the faintest pause in her movements, as if she had felt it too. I caught myself noticing everything, the way her blouse shifted when she leaned over, the quiet determination in her expression, the soft rhythm of her breath as she worked. She was older than me, yes, but in that moment she didn't feel distant. She felt present. Close. And as the two of us stood there in my small living room, folding sheets together under the glow of a single lamp, I couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't just about laundry. It was about something else entirely, something unspoken, unfolding one quiet moment at a time. Folding sheets doesn't sound like the kind of thing that could change the way you see someone. But there we were, standing side by side in my living room, both holding onto the same piece of fabric, and it felt strangely significant. She lifted one corner of the sheet with a practiced ease, and I caught the way her wrist flexed gracefully, her movements precise. I mirrored her on the other end, though not quite as smoothly. The moment we pulled it taut between us, she tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just slightly in playful judgment. "You fold like a bachelor," she teased, her voice light, almost sing-song. I laughed, shaking my head. "And what exactly does that mean?" She raised her brows. "It means you've gotten by without anyone to correct you. Crooked corners, uneven lines, survival folding, not real folding." Her words were delivered with a teasing lilt, but there was no edge in them, only warmth. She smiled as she said it, and I couldn't help smiling back. Something about the way she looked at me then made me feel like the room itself had shifted, the air thicker somehow, filled with quiet awareness. We leaned in at the same time to catch the next corner. Our hands brushed again, a soft collision of knuckles against knuckles, skin against skin. Just a fleeting touch, but enough to send a pulse of heat through me. I wondered if she felt it too, though she didn't let it show. She only adjusted the fabric with steady fingers, pretending the moment was nothing more than clumsy timing. The sheet rustled softly between us as we folded it in half, the sound almost musical in the silence of the room. The lamp above cast a warm glow, turning the plain fabric into something richer, like it carried more weight than it should. Each time we stepped closer to smooth another crease, I caught the subtle brush of her sleeve against mine, the warmth of her shoulder almost grazing me. She looked comfortable here, in my space, not like a guest trying to hurry through, but like someone who belonged. I noticed how she glanced around occasionally, her eyes lingering on the stack of books by the window, the half-empty mug on the table. She didn't comment, but her presence itself made everything feel different, less ordinary. "Better," she said finally, holding the now neatly folded sheet against her chest as though she was inspecting a finished piece of work. "Not perfect, but passable." I gave her a mock bow. High praise. Her laugh was soft but genuine, and it filled the room like sunlight spilling in through curtains. It was the kind of laugh that made me want to hear it again, and again, as though each sound pulled me a little further into her orbit. By the time we moved on to the next sheet, there was an easy rhythm between us. Fold, brush of hands, small talk, the quiet hum of comfort that didn't need filling. Yet under it all, I felt the tension humming steadily, like a string pulled tight, not uncomfortable, but alive, stretching between us with every small, ordinary motion. And as silly as it sounds, I realized something. This wasn't just folding laundry. This was two people learning each other's timing, falling into sync in the most unexpected of ways. The rhythm of folding became slower, almost thoughtful, as though either of us was in a hurry to finish. One sheet lay neatly stacked on the couch, another half spread between us. The silence wasn't heavy, it was comfortable, the kind that invites words rather than demands them. She was the first to break it. "You know," she said softly, almost as if speaking to the fabric itself, "I used to do this every Sunday evening. My daughter and I, folding sheets, towels, whatever pile was waiting." She paused, her eyes tracing the crease she smoothed with her palm. "It was our little routine. Something ordinary, but it kept the house steady." There was a warmth in her tone, but also a shadow, a tenderness shaped by years of carrying responsibility. I watched her fingertips linger along the fabric, as though she could still feel those old evenings stitched into the cotton. "What about now?" I asked gently. She gave a small, rueful smile. "Now she's grown. The house is quieter than I expected it to be." Her voice wavered, just slightly, before steadying again. "It's strange, really. You think you'll miss the noise, the mess, and then you realize you miss the company more." I didn't know what to say at first. There was something vulnerable in the way she said it, like she hadn't meant to reveal so much. But I wanted her to know she wasn't just speaking into the air. "I get that," I said quietly. "I don't have a family of my own yet, but sometimes I wonder if I'm moving through life too quickly. Like I'm running, but I don't even know where to." She looked up then, her eyes finding mine. There was no judgment in them, only recognition, like she understood what I meant without me needing to explain more. The sheet sagged slightly between us as we both let go of it for a moment, our conversation becoming the thing we were really holding. She reached out, not dramatically, not even deliberately it seemed, and rested her hand lightly on my forearm. Just for a moment. The touch was steady, grounding. Her palm was warm against my skin, her fingers soft but sure. "Trust me," she said, her voice low but certain. "None of us really know where we're going. You just find the small things. They keep you steady?" I nodded, feeling her words sink deeper than I expected. Her hand slipped back slowly, but the warmth remained, a quiet imprint that made the room feel different. We picked up the sheet again, folding it with more care than before. Every movement felt slower now, not because the task required it, but because either of us seemed eager to let the moment pass. Her eyes glistened faintly in the lamplight, not with sadness exactly, but with the weight of a story she rarely told. And as I stood there, listening, folding, moving in rhythm with her, I realized I wasn't just learning how she folded her laundry, I was learning how she carried her life. And somehow, she was letting me in. The pile of laundry had thinned, leaving only one last sheet to fold. She lifted it with both hands, the fabric cascading down like a silver curtain in the lamplight, brushing against the floor before we caught opposite corners. This one's always the trickiest, she said with a small smile, raising her brows as if to challenge me. Guess we'll see if I've improved under your expert guidance. I teased back, though my voice came out softer than I intended. We stepped apart, pulling the sheet taut between us, then began folding inward, step by step. The fabric drew us closer, shrinking the space until we were no longer standing comfortably apart but moving into each other's presence, caught in the narrow strip of distance that folding demanded. At first, it was innocent enough, a brush of sleeves, the faint bump of elbows. But then, as we leaned in for the final crease, our faces lowered to the same level, barely an arm's length away. Her perfume rose faintly from the warmth of her skin, subtle but undeniable. My breath caught without warning. I glanced up, only to find her already looking at me. It was not a long stare, just a fraction of a second, but it held far more than words could. Her eyes flickered with something unspoken, a softness edged with hesitation, as though she wasn't sure if she should look away or lean closer. And then, almost comically, the sheet slipped. The smooth cotton tumbled from her hand, falling between us like a curtain being dropped. It brushed across my knee before pooling at our feet, a soft thud in the silence. But neither of us bent to pick it up. For that suspended breath of time, we stayed there, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin, close enough that the quiet rhythm of her breathing seemed to match my own. My heart stumbled, clumsy in my chest, and I wondered if she could hear it. She was the one who finally moved, a quick intake of breath, a small laugh that wasn't quite steady. Clumsy hands? She murmured, bending to retrieve the sheet. Her hair slipped forward as she crouched, and she tucked it back quickly, almost as if she needed the movement to busy herself. I bent too, though slower, and when I reached for the fabric, my fingers found hers again. The contact was brief, a simple overlap of skin against skin, but it was enough to spark that quiet electricity once more. She didn't pull away instantly. Her hand lingered just half a beat too long before withdrawing. When we rose, sheet in hand again, there was a new quietness between us. Not awkward but charged, the kind of silence that feels louder than words, where both people know something shifted but neither dares to name it. She smoothed the fabric quickly, her smile small but a little too practiced this time, as though it was a shield. "We'll call that one a near success," she said softly. I nodded, unable to keep the warmth from my voice. "I'd call it unforgettable." Her eyes flickered again, a glance sharp and fleeting, before she turned back to the couch, laying the sheet down as though it required her full attention. But I knew it wasn't the sheet either of us would remember. By the time we reached the end of the pile, the room felt warmer than when we began, not because of the work, but because of everything unsaid that had filled the silence between us. The couch was now stacked with neat folds of fabric, her hands resting on the final pile as if reluctant to let go of the task. She exhaled, a small, satisfied sound, and smoothed the top sheet with her palm. "There," she said softly. "I'll never forget this." It was almost casual, almost tossed into the air without weight. But her tone carried something more, a quiet undercurrent, like she wasn't just talking about folded sheets anymore. I looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Her eyes lingered, and in them I saw something that made my chest tighten. Gratitude, yes, but also recognition, and maybe even longing. It was fleeting, fragile, the kind of look you could almost convince yourself you imagined if you weren't paying close enough attention. I didn't want it to pass unnoticed. So I smiled, leaning just slightly closer, letting humor soften the truth I felt pressing between us. "Neither will your sheets," I said. For a moment she blinked, then the corner of her mouth lifted. A laugh escaped her, not the polite kind, not even the teasing kind, but a genuine laugh that broke through the quiet tension of the evening. It was low and warm, rolling through her chest, and it filled my living room in a way that made me never want it to stop. She pressed a hand to my shoulder as if to steady herself from laughing too hard. The touch was light, fingertips grazing through the fabric of my shirt, but it sent a pulse of warmth through me all the same. Her laughter softened, tapering into a smile that stayed, and though her hand slipped away slowly, the imprint of it lingered like fire on my skin. "Careful!" she said at last, shaking her head, though her voice was softer now, threaded with something more delicate than amusement. You'll make me laugh too much, and then I'll never want to stop. I wanted to tell her I didn't want her to stop. That the sound of her laughter was better than any music, that I'd carry it with me long after tonight. But the words stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat, too heavy, too dangerous to release in that moment. Instead, I let the silence speak for me. She looked at me again, her eyes holding longer this time, unguarded. Her smile faded just a little, replaced by something quieter, something that made me wonder what she was holding back. My own breath slowed without meaning to, caught in the gravity of the moment. The pile of sheets between us was nothing more than fabric, but it felt like the excuse that had brought us to this, the reason we were standing here, close enough to notice the warmth of each other's presence, close enough to realize this wasn't just neighborly kindness. Her fingers brushed the edge of one folded sheet absently, but her attention was on me. I could feel it as clearly as the touch of her hand on my shoulder moments ago. And though she said nothing more, I knew I'd remember this. The sound of her laugh, the weight of her hand, the way her eyes told me what her lips would not. The stack of folded sheets sat neatly on the couch, a quiet symbol that our little task was done. Yet neither of us moved right away. The room felt settled and unsettled all at once, as though everything was in its place except for the two of us. She gathered the sheets slowly, lifting them into her arms, holding them against her chest like something fragile. The fabric brushed against her blouse, soft cotton on silk, and for a moment she looked almost too graceful for such an ordinary chore. I stood beside her, uselessly straightening the already tidy pile as if to justify the way I lingered. Finally, she turned toward the door. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm, carrying both sincerity and something gentler beneath. "I owe you for this." I shook my head. "You don't owe me anything." Her eyes flickered up at me, the faintest smile tugging at her lips, and for a heartbeat I thought she might say more. But she only adjusted the sheets in her arms and started toward the hallway. I walked with her, not wanting the night to collapse so quickly. The soft sound of fabric shifting with each step seemed to echo too loudly in the small space. When we reached the door, she paused, as though her body remembered something her voice wasn't yet ready to admit. She turned slightly, and the bundle of sheets dipped. I reached out instinctively, steadying the corner before it slipped. My fingers overlapped with hers, skin against skin, and for a suspended moment neither of us let go. Her hand was warm, her grip firmer than I expected for something so small. She didn't pull away right away. She held on just long enough to make the air between us thicken with silence. Her eyes lowered to where our hands touched, then lifted back to mine. There was a faint color in her cheeks, subtle in the lamplight, but unmistakable. When she did let go, it was slow, reluctant, as though she was peeling herself away from something she wasn't ready to lose. My hand lingered on the sheet an instant longer, pressing against the fabric where her touch had been. She exhaled softly, and for the first time that evening, she seemed at a loss for words. The confident ease she usually carried gave way to something more delicate, a vulnerability she didn't hide quickly enough. "I should go," she said finally, though her tone wasn't entirely convincing. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. She opened the door, and the cooler air of the hallway slipped in. She hesitated in the doorway, half turned toward me, as if she might speak again. But instead, she offered a small, quiet smile. It was different from the others that evening, not playful, not teasing, but tender. And then she stepped out, the sound of her footsteps soft against the hall floor. I stood at the threshold long after, my hand still warm from where hers had rested, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air like the last note of a song not yet finished. The door closed softly behind her, and the hallway fell silent. I stood there for a while, hand resting lightly on the doorknob, listening to the faint echo of her footsteps fade until they disappeared into the quiet of the night. The apartment suddenly felt bigger than it had an hour ago, and emptier too. The couch was bare now, the stack of folded sheets gone with her, but I could still see her there, leaning slightly as she laughed, smoothing fabric with the palm of her hand, glancing up with that hesitant vulnerability she tried to hide. I sank into the chair by the window, the glow of the lamp still soft in the corner. My eyes drifted to the coffee table, where a loose thread from the sheet had caught on the edge. I picked it up, running it between my fingers. Something so small, yet it carried the weight of the entire evening, an ordinary task that had turned into something unforgettable. Her perfume still lingered in the room. Not strong, just enough that if I closed my eyes, I could almost imagine she was still there, standing close, her hand brushing mine as if by accident, her voice low and steady as she let me glimpse pieces of herself she didn't share often. I thought about the way she'd paused at the door, how her fingers had overlapped mine on the corner of the sheets, how she didn't let go right away. That hesitation said more than words could have. It wasn't just about laundry. It wasn't just about being neighbors. It was about connection, quiet, fragile, and real. I leaned back, letting the silence settle around me, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of her laughter echoing in my mind, of the warmth that lingered where her hand had rested on my shoulder, of the look in her eyes when she said she'd never forget this. Neither would I. The phrase repeated in my head, circling back to the moment when I'd answered her with a playful grin. At the time, I'd said it to keep things light, to mask the pull I felt growing stronger with each passing minute. But now, sitting alone, I realized I meant it in a way I hadn't dared admit then. I wouldn't forget this, not the sheets, not the touch, not the way the night had changed something quietly inside me. Across the hall, faintly, I heard the sound of her door closing. It was such a small sound, but it grounded me, a reminder that she was still there, only steps away, and that tonight wasn't an ending so much as the beginning of something neither of us had planned for. I pressed my palm against my forearm, right where her hand had rested earlier. The warmth was gone now, but the memory of it lingered, steady and undeniable, like a promise left behind. And in that quiet room, I understood, sometimes the most ordinary evenings, folding sheets, sharing small stories, become the ones you carry with you the longest. She had said she would never forget this. Neither would I, 21.